The moment Julian projected the presentation I had spent 6 months perfecting and claimed it was his idea, my world shattered. He mocked me in front of the entire board, calling me unstable. I stood frozen amidst their cruel laughter until a warm hand touched my shoulder. A deep voice pulled me from hell, saying, "Let's get out of here. This place doesn't deserve you." That was the beginning of the end for my husband's fake empire. My name is Ilara Vance. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal blazer as I stepped off the elevator onto the 40th floor of Meridian Dynamics. The glass walls of the boardroom loomed ahead like the entrance to an execution chamber, though I did not know it yet. I was 32 years old, the creative director of this company, and I carried the weight of Project Helios in my briefcase. This project was my soul poured into code and design for 6 agonizing months. I felt invincible, armed with data and passion. Julian met me at the door. My husband. The vice president. He looked impeccable in his navy suit, the very image of corporate success. He squeezed my hand, a gesture that usually grounded me, but today his skin felt dry and cool. His eyes, usually warm when looking at me, held a strange, detached glint. "You look tense, Ilara," he whispered, leaning in close. "Just let me handle the intro." "Okay. You know how the board gets with technical details." I nodded, trusting him implicitly. I walked in and took my seat. The room was filled with the heavy scent of expensive cologne and old money. The board members, 12 men who had controlled this industry for 40 years, barely looked up from their tablets. Julian stood at the head of the table. He tapped the remote. The screen descended, and the projector hummed to life. The title slide for Project Helios appeared in high definition. My breath hitched in my throat. Beneath the bold, stylized logo I had sketched on napkins at 3 a.m, the byline read, "Conceptualized and led by Julian Vance." My name was nowhere. I blinked, sure it was a mistake. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Julian, there is a typo on the slide. That says—" He did not let me finish. He did not even look surprised. He turned to me with a look of practiced, weary patience that made my blood run cold. "Ilara, honey, please sit down," he said, his voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that made me want to retch. He looked at the chairman. "I apologize, gentlemen. My wife has been unstable lately. Her stress levels are unmanageable, and she has started to become confused about ownership. She hoards work that isn't hers." The silence in the room was absolute. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about? I wrote the code. I designed the interface. You watched me do it. You brought me coffee while I worked." Julian sighed, a theatrical sound that echoed in the silent room. "See, this is what I was afraid of. She calls it her code. She has been delusional for weeks now." I looked around the table, desperate for an ally. I looked at Mr. Henderson, who had praised my preliminary sketches 2 months ago. He looked away, embarrassed. They all looked at me like I was a broken thing, a hysterical woman, a liability. They saw a wife who couldn't handle the pressure, not the creative genius who had built their flagship product. I had to rework the entire back end last night because her original drafts were incoherent. Julian lied smoothly, turning back to the screen. "I salvaged what I could, but the architecture is mine. It was the only way to save the launch. I tried to protect her, but she is clearly unwell." My lungs burned. The room was spinning. He was taking my life's work, twisting it, and using my own vulnerability the nights I confided in him about my anxiety as a weapon to slit my throat in public. I tried to speak, to scream that he was a liar, but my throat closed up. No sound came out. I was drowning in plain sight, suffocated by the air conditioning and the weight of their judgment. I grabbed my portfolio, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I had to get out. I had to leave before I shattered completely. "Sit down, Ilara," Julian snapped, his voice suddenly sharp, before softening back into that sickening fake concern. Actually, no. You know what, you should go home. Take your pills. Stop making a scene at my company. My company. He called it his company. The humiliation was physical. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I turned toward the heavy glass doors, my vision blurred with hot, angry tears I refused to let fall. I reached for the handle, but before I could touch the cold metal, the double doors swung open with a force that made the air pressure in the room drop. Every head turned, the suffocating tension broke, replaced instantly by a wave of shock. A stranger stood in the doorway, and the energy in the room shifted from my humiliation to his undeniable power. The silence that followed the opening of the doors was heavier than the insults my husband had just hurled at me. Standing there was Damon Kincaid. Even in the haze of my humiliation, I recognized him. He was the CEO of Vanguard Corp., Meridian's fiercest rival, and a man known in the industry as a shark who swallowed smaller fish without chewing. Rumors of a secret merger had been circulating for months, but seeing him here, in the flesh, was like seeing a ghost materialize. He did not look at the stunned board members. He did not acknowledge Julian, who had frozen mid-gesture with his mouth hanging open like a fish on a hook. Damon Kincaid walked straight toward me. His strides were long and purposeful, eating up the distance between the door and my corner of hell in seconds. I shrank back against the cold leather of my chair. I was shaking so hard my teeth clattered together. I expected him to join in the mockery, to laugh at the incompetent wife of his competitor. Instead, he stopped right in front of me and extended a hand. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray and tailored to perfection, but his eyes were what held me captive. They were dark, intense, and completely devoid of the pity I saw in everyone else's faces. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. "This place doesn't deserve you." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "Excuse me," Julian's voice cracked, high and incredulous. He stepped down from the podium, his face flushing a blotchy red. "Damon, I don't know what you think you are doing, but this is a private family matter. My wife is unwell. She needs—" Damon turned his head. He did not shout. He did not step forward. He simply looked at Julian with an expression of such profound boredom and latent menace that my husband stopped dead in his tracks. It was the look of a predator dismissing a nuisance. Julian swallowed hard, his bravado evaporating instantly under the weight of superior power. Damon turned back to me, his hand still waiting. "Coming." I looked at Julian, then at the board members who were watching this drama with slack jaws, and finally at Damon's hand. It was a lifeline. I reached out. His grip was warm and solid, pulling me up from the chair. He placed a protective hand on the small of my back and guided me out of the room. We left the stunned silence of the boardroom behind us, the heavy doors clicking shut on my old life. We walked to the private elevator bank in silence. My legs felt like jelly. As the doors slid closed, cutting off the view of the Meridian lobby, my composure finally snapped. A sob escaped my throat, harsh and ugly. Damon did not offer platitudes. He reached into his breast pocket and produced a square of silk, pressing it into my hand. "Dry your face," he commanded gently. "Tears ruin the makeup, and you have a better face for poker than this." "Why?" I gasped, dabbing at my eyes, fighting for breath. "Why did you help me? You don't even know me." "I know you better than you think," Damon said, looking up at the floor indicator as the numbers ticked down. Last week, an email came into the Vanguard General Inquiries inbox. It was an attachment for Project Helios, a robust draft. It was sent from a personal server, likely a mistake on your part when you were working late. I read the metadata. Ilara. I checked the timestamps. I checked the author logs. He finally looked at me, his gaze piercing. "I know Julian didn't write a single line of that code. I know it was you." The elevator dinged, opening into the private garage. I stood there, stunned. He knew. The enemy knew the truth that my own husband had buried. "Come," he said. A sleek black limousine was waiting. The driver held the door open. I slid in, dazed. The interior smelled of leather and possibilities. Damon sat across from me and slid a heavy, cream-colored business card across the small table between us. "I am not offering you a job," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. "I am offering you a weapon. Julian thinks he has won. He thinks he has erased you. I am giving you a chance to remind him that ink is harder to erase than he thinks." The car stopped in front of a quiet, nondescript coffee shop in Tribeca. It was far enough from the financial district that no one would recognize me. "Take the day," Damon said as the door opened. He didn't wait for an answer. He looked me dead in the eye, and for the first time, a small, dangerous smile touched his lips. "And Alara, don't cry because of the man who sold you out. Make him cry because he sold you too cheap." I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The limousine pulled away, disappearing into the traffic of New York. I stood there for a long time, clutching the card in one hand and the silk handkerchief in the other. The wind was cold, but the chill inside me was different now. It wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. I wiped the last tear from my cheek. I was not going home to hide. I was not going to be the crazy wife. Julian wanted a villain, I would give him a monster. I sat in the corner of the coffee shop, stirring a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The steam had vanished, just like the illusion of my perfect marriage. My mind drifted back to 5 years ago, to a time when Julian and I were the golden couple of the New York marketing world. We met at an art exhibition in Soho, surrounded by abstract sculptures and cheap wine. I was hiding in the corner, analyzing the terrible lighting design, while Julian was in the center of the room, charming a group of investors with nothing but a smile and a half-baked theory about consumer engagement. He was the face, and I was the brain. It seemed like the perfect equation at the time. Julian was a salesperson at heart, charismatic, handsome, but lacking the technical vision to actually build the things he sold. I was the opposite. I could design complex algorithms and stunning visual interfaces in my sleep, but the thought of small talk made my palms sweat. We fit together like two jagged pieces of a puzzle. I remembered the nights in our tiny, drafty apartment in Brooklyn. We would sit on the floor, surrounded by takeout boxes of cold pizza, working until 3 in the morning. I would be coding furiously on my laptop while he massaged my shoulders, whispering dreams of a house in the Hamptons and a life of luxury. "We are a team. Alara," he would say, kissing the top of my head. "You and me. Against the whole damn world." I believed him. I believed him so much that I did not see the trap being laid. It started slowly. A small project here, a pitch deck there. Julian would come home with a furrowed brow, looking stressed about a promotion he was chasing. "Ilara, baby, would you mind if I put my name on this one?" he asked one night, holding a portfolio I had spent 2 weeks perfecting. "You know how the board is. They are old-fashioned. They respect a man who takes charge. It is just for optics. Once I get the VP spot, I will make sure everyone knows it was you. I promise." I let him do it. I let him take the credit because I thought we were building a future together. I thought his success was our success. But as soon as we moved into the penthouse in Manhattan, the dynamic shifted. The partnership dissolved into a hierarchy. Julian started criticizing my appearance. He would look at my comfortable sweaters with disdain. "You are not actually going to wear that to the gala, are you?" he would sneer, adjusting his silk tie. "It is a bit dowdy. Maybe you should just stay home tonight. You look tired anyway. Let me handle the social stuff." Then came Sienna. She was his new executive assistant, 24 years old, fresh out of college, and hungry. She had a way of looking at me when I visited Julian's office, a look that was not respectful but predatory. It was a smirk that said she knew something I did not. She would linger too long at his desk, her hand brushing his arm as she handed him documents. She is just ambitious. Ilara, Julian would say dismissively when I brought it up. Stop being so insecure. It is unattractive. The late nights at the office became frequent. Then came the business trips to London and Tokyo. When his phone rang at midnight, he would silence it quickly, claiming it was clients in a different time zone. I swallowed my doubts. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that a man who held me while I cried about my anxiety could never betray me. Sitting in that coffee shop, watching the strangers pass by on the street, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had not just been a supportive wife. I had been a resource. I had been a battery that Julian drained to power his own ascent. I had protected our love, but I had failed to protect my mind, my work, and my dignity. No more, I whispered to the empty chair across from me. No more. I took a sip of the cold tea. It was bitter, but for the first time in years, I was wide awake. I returned to the penthouse, and the silence of the apartment felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I did not confront Julian when he stumbled in an hour later. He reeked of expensive scotch and the arrogance of a man who thought he had just won the world. I played the role he had written for me. I acted the part of the broken, medicated doll. I took the pills he offered supplements he claimed were for my stress and pretended to swallow them, hiding the tablets under my tongue until I could spit them into the toilet. I lay in bed next to him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing change as the alcohol pulled him into a deep, comatose sleep. I waited until 3 a.m. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the cold marble floor. I moved like a ghost through the hallway to his home office. Julian always mocked my hobbies, calling my coding projects cute little puzzles, forgetting that before I was a creative director, I was a back-end developer who could navigate a server architecture blindfolded. He thought his laptop was secure because it had biometric locks, but he was lazy. He had never updated the fail-safe password protocol. I sat in his leather chair and cracked his password in less than 2 minutes. It was pathetic, his birthday followed by the year he bought his first Porsche. I did not look for simple emails or text messages. I went straight for the hidden partitions. I found a folder buried deep within the system architecture labeled System Config, but the file size was massive. I decrypted it. Inside was a directory named Exit Strategy. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I opened the spreadsheets. There it was, a systematic siphoning of our joint assets. Over $4 million had been funneled out of our accounts over the last 18 months into a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The sole signatory on the account was Sienna Miller. You bastard, I whispered into the darkness, my hand gripping the mouse so tight my knuckles turned white. But the money was just the beginning. I found a chat log with the CEO of Meridian. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. CEO is she handled Julian. She is spiraling. The board saw her breakdown today. Once I present Helios as my own, she will be a liability. I will file for power of attorney by the weekend. CEO. Good. We need full intellectual property rights. Get her out, and the CEO chair is yours. But make sure she is discredited first. I felt bile rise in my throat. He was not just stealing my work, he was orchestrating my legal incapacitation. I scrolled further and found a file named Subject Health. It was a log. Beside each date was a note about dosage. He had been swapping my vitamin B complex with a mild hallucinogen and a cortisol spiker. The panic attacks, the brain fog, the trembling hands before meetings. It was not burnout. It was poisoning. He had been gaslighting me chemically. I thought I had reached the bottom of the abyss, but there was one more subfolder titled Trophy Room. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I clicked it. The screen filled with thumbnails. My stomach dropped. They were feeds from hidden cameras. One was positioned inside the smoke detector in our master bedroom. I watched a clip from 2 weeks ago. It was intimate, private. But it was not just stored there. There was a forwarding history. Julian had sent these clips to a private chat group with 3 of his college friends, accompanied by captions that made me want to scrub my skin off with steel wool. "Look at the crazy one go." One caption read, I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. This was not a marriage ending. This was not a love affair gone wrong. This was a crime scene. I was not a wife. I was a mark. I was a victim of a long con designed to strip me of my sanity, my fortune, and my dignity. My hands, which had been trembling, suddenly went still, cold, precise. I reached for the silver locket around my neck. It looked like a sentimental heirloom, a gift from my grandmother. But inside was a micro SD card slot, a prototype for wearable tech I had designed years ago. I plugged it into the side of the laptop. I initiated the transfer. Every bank statement, every chat log, every humiliating video, I took it all. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 90%, 95, 100. I ejected the drive and clasped the locket back around my neck. It felt heavy now, weighted with the destruction of Julian Vance. I wiped the access logs, shut down the computer, and stood up in the darkness. The woman who had walked into this room was a confused victim. The woman walking out was a witness, a prosecutor, and an executioner. The next morning, I was up at 5. I prepared a breakfast worthy of a magazine spread fluffy pancakes, fresh berries, and the dark roast coffee Julian preferred. I dressed in a soft, pale pink cardigan, looking every inch the fragile, repentant wife. When Julian walked into the kitchen, adjusting his cufflinks, I offered him a trembling smile. "I am sorry about yesterday," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the floor. "I don't know what came over me. I think the stress." Julian sat down, sipping his coffee with the air of a benevolent king granting mercy to a peasant. "It is okay, Ilara. I know you are not yourself. That is actually why I need you to sign this." He slid a document across the marble island. It was a power of attorney form, granting him full control over my personal assets and intellectual property rights. "It is just to take the burden off your shoulders," he said, his voice smooth like oil. "You need to focus on healing. Let me handle the heavy lifting. Just sign here, and you can go back to bed." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my favorite fountain pen. "You are right. I can't handle it anymore." I signed my name with a flourish. Julian snatched the paper away the moment the ink touched the page, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He did not know that the pen was filled with high-grade disappearing ink I used for drafting temporary patterns. In 2 hours, that signature would be invisible, and the document would be legally worthless. "Good girl," he said, patting my cheek. "Now, rest." As soon as he left for the office, the fragile wife vanished. I changed into a trench coat and sunglasses and headed to a private wine cellar in the West Village. Damon Kincaid was waiting for me in a dimly lit booth. He looked out of place among the dusty bottles. Too sharp. Too modern. I slid the encrypted hard drive across the table. "It is all there," I said. "The original source code for Helios, the chat logs proving the conspiracy with your rival CEO, and the bank transfers to the Cayman Islands." Damon plugged it into his tablet. His eyes scanned the data, widening slightly. "Ilara, this is explosive. We can file an injunction tomorrow. We can sue Meridian for copyright infringement and fraud. Julian will spend the next 10 years in court." "No," I said, my voice cold. "A lawsuit is too clean. Lawyers, settlements, non-disclosure agreements. He will find a way to spin it. He will play the victim." "Then what do you want?" Damon asked, leaning back. "The Meridian 50th anniversary gala is this Saturday," I said. "He is being announced as the new CEO. It will be live-streamed to investors globally. I don't want to sue him. Damon. I want to destroy him. I want him to lose everything in the exact moment he thinks he has won." Damon looked at me for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "You are terrifying. I like it." We spent the next hour finalizing the details. When I left, I felt a strange sense of calm. The plan was in motion, but I was not done. I needed to isolate him. I went to an internet cafe and used a burner laptop to access the back end of Sienna's phone. Julian had been careless with his passwords, and by extension, hers were easy to guess. I installed a passive tracker and a mirror software that forwarded her texts to me. Then, I began the psychological warfare. I used the supplementary credit card Julian thought I was too anxious to use. I logged onto a luxury personal shopper site and ordered a vintage Chanel handbag. I had it addressed to Sienna's apartment with overnight shipping. The note attached was cruel in its simplicity. "Thank you for your service. Enjoy the gift. Best of luck in your next chapter. Jay." It was the classic kiss-off gift rich men gave their mistresses when they were done playing. Sienna would receive it tomorrow. She would think Julian was dumping her now that he had the CEO position secured. She would panic. She would get jealous. And a jealous, paranoid mistress was a loose cannon that Julian would not see coming. I sat back in the chair, watching the order confirmation screen. The game had changed. I was no longer the prey running through the woods. I was the hunter, and the trap was set. 3 days before the gala, Julian took me to a boutique on Fifth Avenue. He did not ask what I wanted to wear. He selected a dress for me, holding it up against my body with a critical eye. It was a shapeless, high-necked gown in a dull shade of slate gray. It was the kind of dress designed to make a woman disappear into the background, to be nothing more than a shadow to her husband's light. "This is perfect," Julian declared, nodding to the sales assistant. "It is modest. It makes you look stable. We don't want you drawing attention to yourself after your little episode at the office. Do we?" I stared at myself in the mirror. The gray fabric made me look like a ghost. "It is lovely, Julian. Thank you for taking care of me." While he was paying, his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it and smirked, quickly typing a reply. I stood right behind him, looking over his shoulder. It was Sienna. She had sent a photo of herself in sheer lingerie with the caption, "Can't wait to celebrate your coronation. Mr. CEO." My stomach churned, but I forced a smile when he turned around. The real preparation, however, was happening in the shadows. I reached out to Mike, the former head of audiovisual at Meridian. Julian had fired him 6 months ago to cut costs, replacing him with a cheap automated system. Mike still had backdoor access to the venue's lighting grid, and he was more than happy to help me. "Just give me the signal," Mike had told me over a burner phone. "I will make sure the spotlight hits exactly where you want it." The most dangerous part of my plan was the file swap. I waited until Julian was in the shower. I accessed the cloud server for the event management team. There, sitting at the top of the folder, was CEO Keynote Final V2. I deleted it. Then, I uploaded my own file, identical in name and size, but vastly different in content. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had just closed the laptop when Julian walked out, a towel wrapped around his waist. He paused, narrowing his eyes at me. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. "You are awfully quiet these days, Ilara," he said, walking slowly toward me. "It is unnerving. You usually panic before big events." "I am just taking my medication," I said softly, clasping my hands in my lap. "Like you told me to." "Are you—" He reached out and snatched my phone from the bedside table. "Who are you talking to?" I froze. If he saw the messages from Mike or Damon, I was dead, but I had anticipated this. I had been carrying a decoy phone for 2 days, an old model identical to my current one, but logged into a dummy account. Julian scrolled through it. He found nothing but a yoga app, a few recipes for gluten-free bread, and reminders to take my pills. He tossed the phone back onto the bed, looking almost disappointed that he couldn't catch me. "Good," he muttered. "Keep it that way." The final test of my patience came at a pre-gala brunch the next day. I went to the ladies' room and found Sienna touching up her makeup. She saw me in the mirror and didn't even flinch. She applied a coat of bright red lipstick, smacking her lips together. "You look tired, Ilara," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Maybe you should skip the party tomorrow. Julian is going to be the star. You would only drag him down." I washed my hands, taking my time. I dried them on a paper towel and looked her dead in the eye. "Enjoy it, darling," I said, my voice low and smooth. "Enjoy the gifts. Enjoy the attention. Time is a very finite resource." Sienna frowned, clearly confused by my lack of anger, but I was already walking out the door. That afternoon, my real phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Damon. "Everything is set. The top 10 shareholders just received a courier package containing the preliminary evidence. They have been instructed to open it only when the keynote begins." The night before the gala, I could not bear to sleep in the same bed as Julian. I told him I had a migraine and went to the guest sofa. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city of New York breathe outside. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The Ilara who loved Julian was gone. The Ilara who feared him was dead. What remained was cold, hard, and ready. Before I slept, I went down to the garage. I opened the trunk of my car and checked the hidden compartment. The gray dress Julian bought me was hanging in the closet upstairs. But here, folded carefully in a garment bag, was my armor. It was a blood-red gown, silk and chiffon, designed to move like fire. It was cut low and dangerous. I had made it myself. Tomorrow, I would not be the gray ghost. I would be the flame that burned the whole house down. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a suffocating cage of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the even more overpowering stench of old money. It was the 50th anniversary of Meridian Dynamics, and half of the financial elite of New York had gathered to witness Julian's coronation. I walked beside him, a ghost in the shapeless gray chiffon dress he had chosen for me. His hand was clamped around my upper arm, his fingers digging into my flesh with a possessiveness that looked like affection to the cameras, but felt like a threat to me. "Smile, Ilara," he hissed through his teeth, leaning in to kiss my cheek for the photographers. "Try not to look so medicated." I offered a weak, trembling smile to the flashing lights. "I am trying, Julian. It is just so loud." Sienna was holding court near the champagne fountain. She wore a backless emerald green gown that screamed for attention. When her eyes met Julian's across the room, she raised her glass in a silent toast, her lips curling into a smug, knowing smile. She thought she had won. She thought the gray mouse by Julian's side was on her way to a sanatorium, leaving the throne open for her. A sudden hush fell over the room near the entrance. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Damon Kincaid had arrived. He moved through the room with the lethal grace of a panther. He was not supposed to be here. He was the enemy, the CEO of Vanguard Corp., but his presence was a power move that no one dared to challenge. He walked straight to us. Julian stiffened, puffing out his chest. "Kincaid," Julian said, his voice tight. "I didn't think you would have the nerve to show up." "I never miss a historic moment," Damon replied smoothly. He ignored Julian's outstretched hand and turned his dark gaze to me. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of intense respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Vance, you look anticipating." "I am just happy for my husband," I said, casting my eyes down. "As you should be," Damon said. "Tonight will be unforgettable." As the lights dimmed and the orchestra faded, the spotlight hit the center stage. Julian released my arm, adjusting his bow tie. "Stay here," he commanded. "And for God's sake, don't embarrass me." He strode up the stairs to thunders of applause. I waited until he reached the podium and began his opening jokes before I turned to the waiter. I "I think I am going to be sick," I stammered. "Excuse me." I hurried toward the ladies' room, keeping my head down. But the moment the heavy restroom door clicked shut behind me, the sick, trembling wife vanished. I locked the door to the handicap stall. I unzipped the gray dress and let it pool on the floor like a dead skin. Underneath, I was wearing fire. The dress I had designed and sewn in secret was a deep, blood-red silk that hugged every curve of my body before cascading to the floor in a dramatic train. It had a plunging neckline and a slit that went up to my thigh. I pulled the pins from my hair, letting the waves tumble down my back. I applied a coat of crimson lipstick, sharp enough to cut. I looked in the mirror. Alara the victim was gone. Alara the avenger stared back. I did not return to the table. I moved through the service corridors, my heels silent on the carpet. I reached the technical booth in the wings of the stage. Mike, the lighting director Julian had fired and I had secretly rehired for one night, was waiting. He saw me and gave a grim nod. He handed me a wireless microphone. On stage, Julian was reaching his crescendo. He looked out at the sea of faces, his face glowing with narcissism. "When I started this journey," Julian said, his voice booming with practiced emotion, "I knew that true leadership meant innovation. It meant doing the hard work when no one was watching. Project Helios is not just a software. It is the culmination of my sleepless nights. It is my soul. It is the only brainchild I have ever—" I stepped out from the darkness of the wings. Mike hit the controls. The spotlight on Julian abruptly cut out, plunging him into shadow. Simultaneously, a brilliant, blinding beam of white light slammed onto me. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the ballroom. I walked to the center of the stage, the red dress flowing around me like liquid danger. I raised the microphone to my lips. "Really, Julian," my voice rang out, clear and steady, amplified through every speaker in the hall. "Is that true? Is it your brainchild? Or is it the child you kidnapped?" My voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, sharp as a guillotine blade. Julian's face drained of color, turning the shade of old parchment. He gripped the podium, his knuckles white. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed into his microphone, the sound of his panic amplified for everyone to hear. He looked frantically toward the wings. "Security, get her off the stage. She is having an episode. She is dangerous." But the 4 burly guards standing by the exit did not move a muscle. They crossed their arms, staring blankly ahead. 5 minutes of blindness cost a lot of money, but Damon Kincaid had pockets deeper than the ocean. Behind Julian, the massive LED screen flickered. The slide praising his visionary leadership vanished. In its place, a grainy video feed appeared. It was the footage from our bedroom, the one I had pulled from his secret folder. On screen, Julian was laughing, a glass of scotch in his hand, with Sienna draped over his lap. His voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, slurred and cruel. "She is such a pathetic little mouse, isn't she, but a mouse with a golden brain. I will squeeze the last code out of her, commit her to a clinic for exhaustion, and then we take the money and run." A collective gasp ripped through the audience. It sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out of the room at once. Sienna, standing near the front row, froze. A camera crew instantly swung their lenses toward her. She shrieked, covering her face with her clutch, trying to shrink into her emerald gown. But there was nowhere to hide. The video cut out, replaced instantly by a rapid-fire slideshow of documents, emails to the rival CEO, bank transfers to the Cayman Islands totaling $4.2 million, receipts for diamond jewelry bought with company funds. I walked up the stairs to the stage. My red dress trailed behind me like a river of blood. I stood toe-to-toe with the man who had controlled me for 5 years. He was trembling now, sweat beading on his forehead. "You told the board I was unstable," I said, my voice calm, terrifyingly steady. "You told the world I was crazy." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a thick stack of papers. This is the invoice you paid to Dr. Eris for falsified medical records, and these are the toxicology reports from my blood work showing the sedatives you have been slipping into my vitamins for 6 months. I threw the papers into the air. They fluttered down around us like white confetti, landing on Julian's polished shoes. You bitch, Julian roared, his eyes bulging. I made you. You are nothing without me. He lunged at me, his hand raised to strike, desperate to silence the truth. I did not flinch. I did not have to. A dark blur moved from the shadows of the stage. Damon Kincaid stepped between us. He did not punch Julian, he simply shoved him. It was a firm, dismissive push to the chest, backed by raw power. Julian stumbled back, tripped over his own feet, and fell hard onto the stage floor. He scrambled to get up, looking pathetic and small. I looked down at him, then turned my gaze to the stunned audience and the live broadcast cameras. Meridian Dynamics was built on my creativity. I spoke into the microphone, my voice ringing with finality. Every line of code in Helios belongs to me, and as of this moment, I am formally withdrawing my intellectual property rights. The ballroom erupted into chaos. It was not the polite applause of high society, but the guttural roar of a mob realizing they had been swindled. The shareholders, men and women who measured their worth in stock options, began to boo. Julian's phone, which had fallen onto the stage floor during the scuffle, vibrated violently, the screen lighting up repeatedly. I could see the notifications even from where I stood. The stock was free-falling. "Order, I demand order," Julian screamed, struggling to stand, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of heavy doors bursting open. A squad of agents in Navy windbreakers emblazoned with FBI marched down the center aisle. Damon had not just called the police, he had called the federal authorities. They moved with precise military efficiency, parting the sea of stunned socialites like a knife through water. "Julian Vance," the lead agent barked, stepping onto the stage. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage." "No, no, look at her!" Julian yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is the crazy one. She hacked my accounts. She framed me." While Julian was unraveling, I saw movement near the service exit. Sienna was trying to slip away, clutching her sequined purse to her chest, her face pale. She did not make it far. A tall, elegant woman stepped directly into her path. It was Mrs. Vandermeer, the wife of the CFO. I had made sure Mrs. Vandermeer received a very specific set of text messages, texts Sienna had sent to Mr. Vandermeer about an hour ago. Sienna froze. Mrs. Vandermeer did not say a word. She simply raised her hand and delivered a slap that cracked through the noise of the room like a gunshot. Sienna stumbled back, holding her cheek, trapped by the very people she had tried to climb over. On stage, the agents grabbed Julian's arms. The metallic click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "Get your hands off me," Julian shrieked, his polished veneer completely gone. He looked wild, sweating, and desperate. He turned his head, his eyes locking onto mine with feral intensity. "Ilara, you evil bitch. How could you do this to me? I made you." The flashbulbs went off in a blinding stroboscope, capturing him in all his pathetic glory, red-faced, restrained, and screaming at his wife. It was the picture that would end his career before sunrise. The crowd parted again, and Arthur Sterling, the chairman of Meridian, scrambled up the stairs. He looked 20 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. He ignored Julian and rushed toward me, his hands clasped together. "Ilara, Mrs. Vance," he stammered, breathless. "Please, this is a catastrophe, but we can fix it. The board. We want to offer you the CEO position, interim, effective immediately. You can stabilize the stock. You are the face of Helios. Come back. Save the company. I looked at the old man. I looked at the board members standing behind him, the same men who had laughed when Julian called me unstable. Save it, I asked, my voice calm. Why would I do that? You knew, Arthur. You saw the change in the slide decks. You saw the coding signatures. You knew he was stealing my work, but you looked the other way because a charismatic man in a suit made you feel safer than a quiet woman. Alara, please. Think of the employees, Arthur pleaded. I smiled, shaking my head slowly. You should have thought of them when you let a thief run your ship. You knew he was stealing from me, but you did nothing because of profit. You deserve this collapse. Burn with it. I turned my back on them. I walked down the stairs, the train of my red dress following me like the wake of a ship leaving a disaster zone. The reporters surged forward, a wall of shouting mouths and cameras. Mrs. Vance, did you plan this? Mrs. Vance, are you filing for divorce? I didn't have to push through them. A large, warm hand settled on my shoulder. Damon Kincaid was there, moving beside me, using his broad shoulders to create a barrier between me and the vultures. Back off! Damon growled at a photographer who got too close. Give her room! As we neared the exit, the agents were dragging Julian out. Our paths crossed one last time. The police paused for a second to navigate the revolving doors. Julian looked at me. His face was pressed against the glass, distorted and ugly. His eyes were filled with a pure, toxic hatred that would have terrified the old Alara. I looked back at him. I waited for the fear, or the sadness, or even a flicker of regret. But there was nothing, just a cold, clean emptiness. I was not looking at my husband. I was looking at a stranger I had finally evicted from my life. I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the heat of the fire behind me. We walked out of the Plaza Hotel and into the biting cold of the New York night. The air was sharp and clean, scrubbing the scent of Julian's cologne and the stench of his expensive lies from my lungs. I took a deep breath, feeling the oxygen rush into my blood. Behind us, the chaos of the ballroom was fading into a dull roar. But out here, under the city lights, the world felt vast and silent. Damon walked beside me, his stride matching mine. He did not try to steer me or guide me. He simply walked with me. When we reached the curb, he stopped and pulled a slim, leather-bound portfolio from inside his tuxedo jacket. Here, Damon said, offering it to me. This is a draft for articles of incorporation, a new firm. Vanguard Corp puts up the capital as a silent angel investor, but you retain 51% of the equity. You have total creative control. No board of directors to answer to. Just you. I took the folder. The leather felt cool under my fingers. I looked at the papers, then up at Damon. His eyes were dark and serious. For 5 years, Julian had looked at me and seen an asset to be exploited, a battery to be drained until it was empty. Damon looked at me and saw a force of nature. He did not want to own me. He wanted to amplify me. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original power of attorney document Julian had tried to make me sign that morning. I had swapped the disappearing ink version for the real one before I left the penthouse, just to have the satisfaction of destroying it properly. I tore the thick paper down the middle. Then I tore it again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti. I walked over to a metal trash can on the corner and let the pieces flutter down into the darkness. Thank you, Damon, I said, turning back to him. I handed the leather portfolio back to him, but I think I need to start this on my own first. Using your money would just mean trading one safety net for another. I need to know that I can build the net myself. Damon looked at the returned portfolio, then at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was not the smile of a predator, but of a man who had finally found his equal. I understand, he said, tucking the folder away. I will wait. A worthy opponent is always more interesting than a partner anyway. Be careful, Damon, I replied, a playful edge returning to my voice. I might just put Vanguard out of business. I look forward to watching you try, he said, dipping his head in a respectful bow. I raised my hand and hailed a yellow taxi. When it pulled up, I did not give the driver the address of the penthouse on the Upper East Side. I gave him the name of a small, boutique hotel in Chelsea. I was going there with one suitcase in the trunk and a bank account that I would have to rebuild from zero, but my dignity was intact. As the taxi merged into the traffic, I looked out the window. We passed through Times Square, the neon lights blazing like a synthetic sun. On the massive curved screen of the NASDAQ building, the breaking news ticker was already running. Breaking Meridian Dynamics CEO arrested at gala. Stock plummets. Ex-wife Ilara Vance, hailed as unsung genius behind Helios. I watched the words scroll by. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had worn in 5 years. It reached my eyes. It reached my soul. I pulled my phone from my purse. I opened my contacts list. I found Julian's number and hit block. Then I found his mother's number and blocked that too. I went to my own profile settings. I deleted the bio that read, Wife of Julian Vance. My fingers tapped the screen, typing out my new reality. Ilara Vance, CEO. The taxi sped up, weaving through the rivers of red taillights. I was not looking back at the wreckage I had caused. I was looking forward, ready to build an empire of my own design, where the only name on the door would be mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear it.